The first one, number 10, going up to number 1, is this book called The Making of a Salafi Muslim Woman, Paths to Conversion, by Annabel Inger. It's published by Oxford University Press.
Yeah.
And Annabel is an academic teaching at King's College here in London and at SOAS. So she's not a Muslim, but she is obviously a woman. And I say that because she is a woman looking at Salafi Muslim women's experience.
Yeah.
And this is academic research.
Yes.
It's not like opinion. It's based on the surveys and skilled way that she has tried to understand the subject that she's chosen to look at.
Yes.
Well, I just wanted to read just 2 paragraphs from her book, from the introduction, actually, page 5, because and then comment on why I think this is so significant. And I think it really is significant what she says.
Yes.
Because very few studies have been done sympathetically of trying to listen to Salafi women and their experiences. Most of it's been judging them or making assumptions about them rather than listening to their actual experience.
Because, of course, there is a stereotype in the Western press about Salafis in general, but also Salafi Muslim women in general.
Yes, absolutely.
So are you saying that this book, in a way, breaks those stereotypes?
Well, I'll read the quote, and then and I'm not saying this is a representative quote of her whole thesis, but I think it does say something there. She says, Salafi women are typically considered to be either a sinister part of the radicalization apparatus or pitiful domestic slaves. Similarly, the wearing of the burqa, in inverted commas, often used to describe the niqab or the jilbab worn together, is a sign of Islamist extremism, self-segregation, and or female oppression. And then she references some articles that actually state this.
Yes.
The reality, however, is much more complicated. Most Salafis in Europe, including those who feature in this study, are explicitly against violence, so that they should not be essentialized as a security threat. Furthermore, empirical research suggests that Muslim veiling in the United Kingdom, she focuses on the UK Salafi experience, is largely a personal choice. And this study indicates that Salafi niqab wearing is no different. In fact, she says, far from being forced by their families to cover up, and this is a really interesting point, I discovered that many Salafi women are subject to considerable pressure to wear less. The vast majority come from non-Salafi families and became Salafis as teenagers and adults. Many are converts with other faith backgrounds. The rest are largely from less conservative or non-observant Muslim families. I have never heard of coerced niqab wearing, but have met many women whose families implore them or try to force them, sometimes threatening violence, to discard their veils and gowns, which they saw as the culture of the Arabs or even extremist. I'll leave it there. This is peer-reviewed academic research.
Yeah.
And why does this matter? Because in Germany, I was recently in France, where I visit regularly, a completely opposite stereotype of veils.
Yes.
It's not based on reality. It's based on, it's a myth we've had about Jews, about other ethnic minorities, about Catholics, in England. We had these appalling caricatures, which are not based on the truth. And occasionally you get a brave academic who has no particular vested interest in this. She's not a Muslim. Come along and do objective study and talking to thousands and thousands of Salafi women. And you hear a very different story. So the Making of a Salafi Woman, Paths to Conversion, has been recommended by some very distinguished scholars, academics on the back, published by Oxford University Press, really is a myth buster. And that's why I like this book. It tells the truth about Muslims in Britain who are so often shrouded in lies, misconceptions, deliberate falsities, actually. Despite us speaking the truth, the myths still prevail, and that's the tragedy.
Where do these myths come from, Paul? I mean, you are, dare I say, an Englishman. You are an Englishman.
Dare I say?
This
is something one has to dare about these days. Gosh, I'm an Englishman.
You're an Englishman.
In a country full of them.
In a country full of Englishmen.
In England? Sorry,
right.
Carry on.
Where does this, I don't know if it's animus, maybe, if that's the right word, towards Muslims, in particular Muslim women, come from? I mean, where do we locate this type of animosity or this stereotype in British thinking?
Well, it is part of unfortunately, the civilizational conflict that's existed for...
Is it post 9/11?
No, it's pre 9/11.
Really?
This goes back virtually 1,400 years. If you look at how some Christians like John of Damascus, the famous Christian theologian, deceived Muslims, and you go through the medieval period. You get this kind of self-perpetuating narrative about Muslims or what they're really like, which are 99%, particularly in the past, based on complete rubbish. I mean, inaccurate information.
Yes.
Where does that come from? Well, it's the same kind of question we can ask about myths about Jews as baby killers or Christ killers in anti-Semitic discourse in Christian Europe. Martin Luther, particularly vicious.
Really?
The same language about Catholics in England who were persecuted until the 19th century in England. That these people were alien, foreigners who couldn't be trusted. They're not really British. This is Catholics in England, born here, You get these bizarre notions born of xenophobia and fear and ignorance. And I think we see many I don't want to kind of single out Muslims as if they're kind of unique. They're not, although the characteristics of the prejudice are unique.
Yeah.
But they do parallel many other similar kinds of misrepresentation of minorities we have seen in the West. But fortunately, some of it's breaking down.
I mean, it's a fascinating book, and the way you describe it, I think it's worth a read.
Yeah.
Why does Miss Inge say, when referring to converts, why do so many white, in inverted commas, of women in Britain become Muslims?
Well, she does address that too, and I didn't prepare a reading from that. But if I remember rightly, it's the reasons that we all, or those of us who embrace Islam from a non-Muslim background, embrace Islam.
Yeah.
It provides a complete deen, a complete way of life that provides answers to our problems, our family problems, how we relate, men and women relate to each other, what the purpose of life. It gives a sense of moral certitude, a sense of guidance, and so on. And these are the reasons why. And typically, Salafi women take it really seriously and go right back to the Quran and the Sunnah as understood by the early generations, the first three generations of the Salaf. So they have that particular conceptualization of it.
Yeah.
And often they're quite courageous because they can suffer even violence from their non-Muslim or even Muslim family members who disapprove of them taking their faith so seriously. So,
well, thank you very much. I think that's a fantastic book to start with. So let's move on to book number 9.
Well, this couldn't be more different. This book, how can I put it? It's going to take a bit of explaining.
Go on.
This is a book called The Critic of Pure Reason by a German philosopher called Immanuel Kant.
Yes.
Now, this book was first published in 1781. What can I say about this incredible work? I'm very interested in philosophy. I studied philosophy at university, and this book, for me, is the Mount Everest of works of philosophy. It is the most difficult, challenging book ever written by a philosopher, and I think many professional philosophers would agree with that. It encapsulates many of the Enlightenment ideals to do with how we view the world. I'm not going to go into a detailed explanation of this because it will take us way off the subject, and it's part of an ongoing discussion in Western philosophy that Kant contributes to, principally between the rationalists represented by Descartes and the empiricists represented by the Scottish Enlightenment philosopher David Hume. And he comes along and basically offers a synthesis. Again, I'm resisting temptation to get involved in what the discussion is about. But the Critic of Pure Reason, interestingly, Kant's doctoral thesis was, and I've actually written down here because is headed with the words Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim in Arabic.
Wow.
And that puzzled a lot of people, and it still puzzles people today, why he had this, in the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. It begins every surah of the Quran, apart from one, I think, number 9.
Yeah.
So this is interesting. But just to give you just one quote, because at least I can say I've quoted Kant. He says at the very beginning, 2 things fill the mind with ever new and increasing admiration and awe. The more often and more enduringly reflection is occupied with them, the starry heavens above and the moral law within me. So this is the Critic of Pure Reason. And I often joke, because CPR, the Critic of Pure Reason, you will need CPR after having read this. CPR is cardiopulmonary resuscitation.
Yes.
That is an original joke with me, I hasten to add. It is copyrighted and trademarked. You cannot use it. That's right. Okay. So you will need CPR after having read CPR. No, but it is a work of genius. And when I first read it, I'm still constantly in awe of the incredible intellect that this guy brought to the subject. It's quite extraordinary. Another reason to read is to appreciate greatness rather than mendacity and banality and ugliness, sheer genius, and is accessible through reading. And he is considered by most philosophers to be the founder of modern philosophy.
Yes.
So first you have Plato going back to the ancient Greeks, but then in modern philosophy since the 17th century, Kant is the greatest philosopher ever in the West.
Yeah. And how accessible is it?
It's totally inaccessible.
Well, thank you very much.
I'm not going to kid you. It's totally inaccessible. And unless you've got a philosophical background.
Yes.
I remember at college, I had to wait to the second year before we were allowed to attend Kant's lectures. And I remember going in my first year at uni, because I was already familiar with Kant, jumping that and going to a class in the second year, because I could.
Yes.
And A.C. Grayling, who was my tutor.
Of course, yes.
My personal tutor.
Oh, wow.
I sat at the back of the class hoping he wouldn't see me.
Yeah.
And he made a comment saying, well, this is very good. I noticed some people here haven't even completed the first year and they're sitting in the class. And I was allowed to be there because I was a member of the university, but he didn't quite approve. But I sat there because I thought, everyone will want to hear about this guy.
Yeah.
And A.C. Grayling is a brilliant expositor of Kant.
Of course.
So anyway, enough about him. He's an atheist.
That's right. Well, book number 8, please.
Yes.
Paul.